Okay, so it's fairly simple, I think, to avoid the major pitfalls when it comes to writing good NPCs. But a lot of game makers sort of seem to happily jump in them, and it is because of time and money and the practical things. But before I get into this, I just want to put a disclaimer on it because unlike many of the speakers here, I don't have this incredibly broad, amazing, in-depth knowledge of hundreds of games. I have a very deep knowledge of very few games, and then a medium-depth knowledge of a few more. So I'm missing out on some incredible friends and foes. So you can tell me your favourite ones at the end. I just thought this would be a good talk topic, so we can all get it off our chests about people getting in the way. I also wanted to say that to some extent, I think that terrible and predictable NPCs have their place because it's always fun to complain about like a common grievance, and we can all do a nice chorus of certain lines from Skyrim. Terrible NPCs generate memes that just cover the internet. But it's like any bad experience. Like while it's happening, you fucking hate it, but you bond over it later on. It's like my first job. I'm not going to get into that. Okay, so first, the easy slide. Okay, these are the things we hate. So, bad voice acting. It's simple, self-explanatory. There's nothing like a bit of completely wooden voice acting, or alternatively, like Brian Blessed, that really will get my hackles up. Unless it's part of the joke, which is something else entirely. And I've been sitting here for like the entire evening thinking, I should have put this in my talk, I should put that in my talk. And something that came to me was how in Don't Starve, they don't have voices, they've got instruments. And I think that's a lovely idea. I think that's great, but I kept starving, so we're not going to get into that. The other thing, getting in the way. Self-explanatory. It's this phenomenon that inspired this entire talk for me, because a number of times that Lydia has stood in a doorway, and the only way to get her out of the way is to shout at her, and like she doesn't seem to mind, but I mind, and it's my feelings that matter at all times. And okay, next up, escort or rescue missions, and I can go along with it for a while if it's just a plot device. Which it often is, and I accept it's an easy way to add in some tension, but there comes a point where the defenseless teenager or the untrained scientist really should be able to make it from barrel to barrel without getting shot or stuck in traps when you take the eye off them, and it becomes a hassle, and more importantly, it breaks immersion when someone starts acting like they're in a bad horror movie, like making the worst decisions possible, like going in the basement. I saw a really good horror movie the other day, it's called It Follows, you should see that. I was doing really well about not going off on tangents then. Okay, so, and the last one was helplessness/useless AI, and that's connected to the escort mission because the AI has to be fairly useless in order for you to be required to babysit them, but it's just so damn frustrating. But one of my favorite things about NPCs is when they're able to do things that you can't, so not only do you need them in order to progress, but they've got their own special skills, and it makes them more of a person. But if they can't help you out and they're not actually interesting to interact with, it just feels like they're holding you back. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, characterization is the main thing for me when it comes to games. Like, it could be the most bare bones setting and plot, but if I'm interested in the people in the game, then, you've got me. If I'm bored by them and also constantly being forced to rescue them, I'm probably not going to bother finishing. And so one of the worst NPCs I've come across is Ashley, because for me, she has like all of those traits. Like, it wasn't exactly bad voice acting, it was just really annoying. And I looked up some of her quotes, and 3 of them was, Leon, help, help. And that's just what she does. She just cries for help the entire time. And I think you play as her for a little bit, but it's mostly just running around. And I just feel it was a waste. And there's some, like, I Googled for a picture of her, and I didn't like what I found. So people should be ashamed of themselves. Basically, she's like Carl from The Walking Dead, essentially. Also, I never played GTA 4 because I can't drive in any video game. But I was introduced to Cousin Roman and his endless bowling requests. So I thought I'd give him an honourable mention on behalf of my friend that I was with this weekend. Okay. The good stuff. So it's the character development. If we're talking about the kind of NPC who's your friend and companion throughout the whole thing, it's great when they react to whatever you're going through together. If they're exactly the same at the end as when you first met them, then it's a bit of a wasted opportunity. But luckily, there are lots of examples of good character development in video games, like basically everyone in Mass Effect, but I have an entire talk about that. And we're not going down that path again. And one of the best kinds of NPC development for me is when there is, in TV tropes language, a heel-face turn, which is a bad guy turning good, or a face-heel turn, which is a good guy turning bad. Portal 2 has both of those, and we'll get to that, as you can see. Then there's the adding to the plot dimension, and this is connected to character development, obviously, because having an NPC that actually affects the plot outcome instead of just enabling you is great. Especially if it's in an unpredictable way, because we can't always tell what our real life friends are going to say and do. So it's super cool when a video game does that as well. And coming up with a completely original character arc is famously difficult. But a bit of creative thinking can go a long way. Individuality, and this is the most important, essentially the basis of the whole talk, because carbon copies of generic action archetypes, or any other kind of archetypes, are boring. I understand it for NPCs who are just there to deliver a message or ask for 10 herbs. And I can forgive it if the overall plot is really excellent. But someone who's going to be with it for the whole game should have to have a little bit of a personality, and they should have something that defines them that isn't you. And then interaction, and this was touched on in a talk about, I think it was about virtual reality games a few months ago. I can't remember who gave it, but he talked about how the first thing you do in a VR headset is go up to whoever's in front of you and get in their face, and then you just run into the wall and you just bounce around, have a bit of fun. And from memory, I think the gist of it was that you need to give players boundaries about what is and is not acceptable in the game. So the other person would say, hey, or stop that, And I think that while it's super fun to put buckets on people's heads and just run amok, it's also good to have your actions affect them because they become less like statues and more like people. But I still think that assassination is overkill. So I wanted to give an example of doing an NPC really right, and that's Wheatley. So Wheatley is just this fantastic individual, happens to be a computer voiced by Stephen Merchant, and that's basically all you need to know. So yeah, he's your guide throughout Portal 2, and he's an incredibly funny character who's... spoilers. Is spoilers okay? Yeah. Okay. Suddenly becomes the villain, which is what I referred to earlier about... Just... Don't play with me! Okay. It's what I referred to earlier about face-heel turn. But the best thing is that he regrets it later when he's all alone on the moon, and I can't stay mad at him. And it's what I said about voice acting, because you've got Stephen Merchant, he's fucking brilliant, and I'm not a huge fan of what he does with Ricky Gervais and such, but I can overlook that because he's just this adorable, slightly awkward but quite enthusiastic computer who, at least for the first part of the game, is like totally rooting for you, and you're like, yeah, got Wheatley. And even better, him turning evil means that you end up creating an alliance with GLaDOS, who is the previous game's terrifying villain, who is also a potato. And I also found out that on the Portal wiki, there's like an entire page of all Wheatley's lines with audio clips, and there is a song by Miracle of Sound, and it is the best, most catchy thing in the world. I mentioned my partner who doesn't like games, and he hates that song because it's so catchy, and he's like, I don't want to be singing about games. Why have you done this? So having said all that, it is time for the next slide. So this is Minecraft, obviously, because it does a really interesting thing because it allows you to create your own NPCs to help you if you so choose. And I think it's really cool that you get the choice as to whether you have companions or not in whatever your quest is. So I've got a farm and a pack of dogs. You can have villagers, but I think you can turn them off if you turn off structure spawning. But you can be me and never, ever, ever find any villagers, no matter what or where or however hard you look, in all the hundreds of hours I've spent playing. But I just think it's interesting that these games give the opportunity to create your own NPCs that you can do whatever you want with. You can leave them alone, you can take them mining with you. I wouldn't recommend that because there's lava. God, so many deaths. I think it's because with games like Minecraft, the story is your own, so there's no need for anyone to point you in a certain direction or to get themselves kidnapped or to tearfully confess their love for you before dying, because you call the shots, and I like that. And finally, there's as you may have noticed, I am, in fact, a black woman. And all joking aside, like, I know that most people, especially indie game developers, don't set out to create ludicrously racist and sexist stereotypes. And it's incredibly likely that no one in this room would ever dream of such a thing, and that people here are better than that. And that's the feeling that I've had in my time here, and it's been really great, even though I have noticed that I think I'm the only black person in the room right now. It's so awkward when you recognise that. And it's even more awkward when there's only one other black person, and you're like, hey. But yeah, I've been really pleasantly surprised, because like up until last summer, most of my exposure to the gaming community was online, and it was terrible. But you know, I found that basically it's always worth saying, when you're creating a character, do try to avoid the cliches, because you'd be surprised what intelligent people I have had discussions with about how blackface is racist. Okay. So the thing about stereotypes, that can be much more subtle than just literally making all the Africans primitive tribes people, which I'm sure none of you would do, but apparently no one at Capcom thought it might come across a little bit shit. So I made a really, really brief list of some of the things that aren't so obvious, but still annoy the hell out of me, and I'm sure everyone has their own versions. Okay, so the magical Negro. I can say Negro. Okay, so the epitome of this is John Coffey from The Green Mile. Basically, the magical Negro is this mild-mannered, just like, I'm trying to think of it's like Gandalf, but not actually as kick-ass. They use their sort of exotic spiritual wisdom to teach you something about life, and they often die at the end, usually while saving you. Or immediately after they've imparted that lovely wisdom to you, because they've served their purpose now. And it's annoying because the character never seems to have any needs or wants for themselves, and they're just sort of completely dedicated to you instead. And it's similar to what we were saying earlier about giving NPCs individuality and independence, and how if they don't have that, then you end up not caring about them as much, because they never react or grow. Except this trope is worse because of, you know, slavery and whatnot, and the unconscious perception of black people as a means to an end instead of the protagonists of our own stories. I have strong feelings. You get bonus points if the character makes poignant comments about race as well with this one. Next one, the strong independent woman who don't need no man except for the player. See, this is a tricky one, because a while ago, feminists demanded that women in the media not always be damsels in distress waiting to be saved. And after a few years, started to get some good characters. We got like Ripley in Alien, but eventually they went completely in the opposite direction with female action characters and skipped over any complex emotions whatsoever. And this one has bonus points if the manly hero finally overwhelms the woman's defenses and reveals her soft side that she'd never ever show to anyone else ever. Basically, she's another princess, but the fortress is her hard-nosed nature. I was president of the Writing Society at university. Okay, so this strong woman thing is like a billion times worse if the woman is also black, and it's not. I'm not asking for everyone to be princesses, but when it comes to black women, it's incredibly rare for us to be seen as anything other than strong and independent, because that's where the whole I'm a strong, independent woman who don't need no man thing, like that is African-American vernacular, and it's always seems to be attached to like this ghetto black woman with a weave, and it's just one more stereotype, and whenever I see it being used, it just makes me really, really angry, and that's not in my notes, so I'm going to go back to them. Basically, we're barely ever in a position to be saved, and sometimes I feel like it's because we're not really seen as worthy of being saved. So it's like with the Hunger Games, and when people realized that Rue was black, they said it didn't matter as much when she died. And I had a similar thing with True Blood as well. I don't know if anyone watched that, but there was Tara, and she was the dark-skinned female character. And I loved that she never took any shit, but she basically seemed to keep getting punished for it. But yet she still always had to be there for Suki, who was literally a fairy. Like, But again, when it comes down to it, the problem is that the character has one dimension and is not a person, and creating a black woman who isn't really a person is a big problem. And then there's this one, which I made up myself, the topsy-turvy bigot, because I was trying to find a good way to phrase it. So obviously I've got no problem with using a game to point out that racism or sexism or homophobia is wrong. I'm a fan of that. But the main problem is that it can be done really badly, and I'm thinking of Bioshock Infinite here. Because it ended up basically saying you're never allowed to fight back, just quietly take incredible amounts of oppression until we eventually realize that it's bad to kill you for who you are. And at one point, Booker equates someone fighting to free their people with murderous racists. And basically, if you want to say that racism is bad, just say it's bad. And you don't need a metaphor at this point. And it reminds me of this book. It was something to do with pearls. And it was basically this woman wrote a book about what if black people were the racists. And they treated white people really badly. And yet the white people were always like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it basically displayed her own innate racism. Because so like white people were called pearls, and black people were called coals, and it was like that in a nutshell is why you should not be writing this book. You couldn't even think of like ebony or jetstone or something for your shitty metaphor. It had to be coal, fucking coal. Anyway. There are a few more of these, but I probably don't have enough time. And having said all this, it's your game and it's your characters. But if you're one of the many people I've met who wants to make sure the game is enjoyable for as many people as possible, then this is a place to start. And I think I have a last slide. Don't point at the screen. There we go. Hey, that's it.